ಸಂಸಾರದಾವಾ ನಲಲಿದಲೋಕ ತ್ರೈಣಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಘನ ಘನಾತ್ವಂ ಪ್ರಾಪ್ತಸ್ಯ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣಾರ್ಣವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಗುಣಾರ್ಣವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಮಹಾಪ್ರಭೋ ಕೀರ್ತನ ನೃತ್ಯ ಗೀತ ವಾದಿತ್ರಮಾದ್ಯಾನ್ ಮನಸೋರಸೇನ ರೋಮಾಂಚಕಂ ಪಾಸುತರಂಗಭಾಜೋ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಶ್ರೀವಿಗ್ರಹಾರಾಧನ ನಿತ್ಯನಾನಾ ಶೃಂಗಾರತಾನ್ಮಂದಿರಮಜನಾದೌ ಯುಕ್ತಸ್ಯ ಭಕ್ತಾಂ ಸನಿಯಂಜತೋಪಿ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಚತುರ್ವಿಧ ಶ್ರೀ ಭಗವತ್ಪ್ರಸಾದ ಸ್ವಾದನ್ನ ತೃಪ್ತಾನ್ ಹರಿಭಕ್ತ ಸಂಗಾನ್ ಕೃತ್ವೈವ ತೃಪ್ತಿಂ ಭಜತಃ ಸದೈವ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಶ್ರೀರಾಧಿಕಾ ಮಾಧವಯೋರಪಾರ ಮಾಧುರ್ಯಲೀಲಾ ಗುಣರೂಪನಾಮ್ನಾಂ ಪ್ರತಿಕ್ಷಣಾ ಸ್ವಾದನಲೋಲುಪಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ನಿಕುಂಜಯೂನೋ ರತಿಕೇಲಿ ಸಿದ್ಧೈ ಯಾಯಾಲಿಭಿರ್ಯುಕ್ತಿರಪೇಕ್ಷಣೀಯ ತತ್ರಾತಿದಾಕ್ಷ ಅತಿವಲ್ಲಭಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರೋ ಶ್ರೀಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಸಾಕ್ಷಾಧರಿತ್ವೇನ ಸಮಸ್ತಶಾಸ್ತ್ರೈ ಉಕ್ತಸ್ತಥಾ ಭಾವ್ಯತ ಏವ ಸದ್ಭಿಃ किन्तु प्रभोय प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत् प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायां स्तुवं तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् ध्यायां स्तुवं तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमस्ते जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha, Gopal Govinda Rama Sri Madhusudana, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohana. Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavat Gita, Sri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha, Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunada. Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha, Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय राधा नील माधव, राधा नील माधव श्री राधे। जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह, जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह, जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह, जय भक्त प्रहलाद। जय सीताराम, जय लक्ष्मण हनुमान, जय सीताराम, जय लक्ष्मण हनुमान। जय जगन्नाथ, जय बलदेवा, जय सुभद्रा, जय सुदर्शन चक्र। बलदेवा जय सुभद्रा, जय सुदर्शन चक्र। नित्य गौर हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, नित्य गौर हरि बोल। जय जय प्रभुपाद, 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय जय गुरुदेव, 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 जय जय गुरुदेव। गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिजगाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री एसी भक्तिवेदांत शील प्रभुपाद गोस्वामी महाराज की, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की, नमाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवाचार्य गौर भक्त वृंद की, समवेत भक्त वृंद की, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories, Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki।
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय, नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रहलाद लाद दायिने हिरण्यकाशिपूर्वशः शिलाटङ्कनखालये शिलाटङ्कनखालये ईतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह ईतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह बाहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह बाहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह निरसंगमादि शरणं प्रपद्ये नरसिंहमादि शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलबरे नखम् अद्भुतशृङ्गम् दलितैरण्यकश्यपूतनुभृङ्गम् तव करकमलबरे नखम् अद्भुतशृङ्गम् दलितहिरण्यकशिपूतनुभृङ्गम् केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव रूपा नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंह देव जय नरसिंह देव जय नरसिंह देव जय नरसिंह देव नरसिंह देव नरसिंह देव नरसिंह देव जय नरसिंह जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः जे तो मारा शरण लोए तारा वंच पूर्ण हो कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी मोरा यही अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो बार नयने हरि बो सदा जुगल रूप रासी এই নিবেদন ধারো সখীরানু গাতা করো सेवाधिकारा दिए करो निज दासी दीना कृष्णा दासे कोय जे ना मोरा होए श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जे न भाषी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जिन भासी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः यानि कानि चापापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Maharani, Jayo Tulsi Mahar, Jayo Tulsi Mahar, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi, Jayo Vrinda Devi. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय, वृंदा देवी की जय.
I bow before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Sri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has his wishes fulfilled. Bestowing your mercy on him, you make me a resident of Vrindavana. My desire is that you also grant me a residence in the pleasure groves of Vrindavan Dhama. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the cowherd damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen lowly servant of Krishna prays. May always swim in the love of Sri Sri Radha and go in the Sri. There are 10 offenses to the holy name which are to be avoided. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the holy name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures in pursuance to the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be an imagination. 6. To give some interpretations to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in the Vedas as fruitive activities, Karma Kanda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. 10. To not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names and to maintain some material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive to while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must guard against these offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Let us offer our श्री चैतन्य शिष्टाष्टकम की जय। चेतो दर्पणमार्जनम भव महादावाग्नि निर्वापनम श्रेयकैरवचंद्रिका वितरणम विद्यावधू जीवनम आनंदम बुद्धिवर्धनम प्रतिपदम पूर्णामृता स्वादनम सर्वात्मा स्नापनम परम विजयते श्रीकृष्ण संकीर्तनम नाम नामकारी बहुधा निज सर्वशक्ति तत्रार्पिता नियमिता स्मरणेन कालाः एतादृशी तव कृपा भगवान् ममापि दुर्दैवम् ईदृशम् इह जनीनानुरागः त्रिनादपि सुनीचेन तरोरपि सहिष्णुना अमानीना मनादेन कीर्तनीया सदा हरिः न धनं न जनं न सुन्दरीं कवितां वा जगदीश कामये मम जन्मानि जन्ममीश्वरे भवताद्भक्तिर्हैतुकी त्वयि अयि नन्दतनुजा किङ्करं पतिता मां विषमे भवाम्बुधौ कृपया तव पादपङ्कजा स्थितधूलिसदृशं विचिन्तय नयनं गलदश्रुधारया वदनं गद्गदाहृदया गिरा पुलकैर्निचितं वपु कदा तव नामग्रहणे भविष्यति युगायितं निमशेन चक्षुषा प्रवर्षायितं शून्यायितं जगत्सर्वं गोविन्दविराहेण मे आश्लीयवापादरतं पिनस्तु माम् आदर्शनं मर्महतं करोतु वा यथा तथा वा विददातु लम्पतो मत्प्राणनाथास्तु सा एव नापरः हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे श्री चैतन्य Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana movement is a prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, and devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do you desire beautiful women, nor do you want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. At some or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand in the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so when he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worship Lord, unconditionally. Sri Chaitanya. Sri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunadanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakanvitamsya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namini नमस्ते सरस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमः ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिसिद्धान्त सरस्वती इति नामिने श्रीवर्षभानवी देवी दयतया कृपाब्दये कृष्णसम्बन्धविज्ञानदायिने प्रभवे नमः मधुरोज्ज्वलप्रेमाज्या श्रीरूपनुगा भक्तिदा श्रीगौरकरुणाशक्तिविग्रहाय नमोऽस्तु ते नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्तये दिनतारिणे रूपनुगा विरूपा सिद्धान्ता द्वन्द्वहारिणे नमो गौरकिशोराय साक्षाद्वैराग्यमूर्तये विप्रलम्बरसम्बोधे पदं भुजयते नमः नमो भक्तविनोदाय सच्चिदानन्दनामिने गौरशक्तिस्वरूपाय रूपनुगावरायते गौरविर्भवभूमेस्त्वं निर्देशा सज्जनाप्रिया वैष्णवा सर्वभूमा श्रीजगन्नाथाय ते नमः वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनाम्ने गौरे तुषे नमः पंचतत्वकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तु ते जयतां सुरतौ पङ्गोर्मम मन्दमतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्वपदं भोजौ राधामदनमोहनौ दिव्याद्वृन्दारण्यकल्पाद्रुमदा श्रीमद्रत्नागरा सिंहासनस्थौ श्रीमद्राधा श्रीलगोविन्ददेवो प्रेस्ताल्भिः सेव्यमानौ स्मरामि श्रीमन् रसरसरम्भी वंशीवततः कर्षन्वेणुस्वनैर्गोपीर्गोपीनादा श्रियस्तुनः तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावरैश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ईश्वर परमा कृष्ण सच्चिदानंद विग्रह अनादिरादिर्गोविन्दः सर्वकारणकारणं चिन्तामणि प्रकारशद्मषु कल्पवृक्ष लक्षावृतेषु सुरभिरभिपालयन्तं लक्ष्मीसहस्रशतसम्भ्रमसेव्यमानं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि वेणुं क्वनन्तमरविन्ददलाय तक्षं बर्हावतं संसातितं बुधसुन्दराङ्गं कन्दर्पकोटिकमनीयविशेषशोभं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि आलोलचन्द्रकलसाद्वनमाल्यवंशी रत्नागदं प्रणयकेलिकलाविलासं श्यामं त्रिभङ्गललितं नियताप्रकाशं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि अङ्गानि यस्य सकलेन्द्रियवृत्तिमन्ति पश्यन्ति पन्ति कलयन्ति चिरं जगन्ति आनन्दचिन्मयसदुज्ज्वलविग्रहस्य गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि अद्वैतमाच्युतम् अनादिमनन्तरूपम् आद्यं पुराणपुरुषं नवयौवनं च वेदेषु दुर्लभम् अदुर्लभम् आत्मभक्तौ गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि पन्तष्टुकोटिशतवत्सरसम्प्रगम्यो वायोरतापि मनसो मुनिपुङ्गवानां सोऽप्यास्ति यत्प्रपदसिं विचन्ततत्त्वे गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि एकोऽप्यसरचयितं जगदन्धकोटिं यच्चक्तिरस्ति जददन्तचयदन्तः अन्दन्तरस्थपरमानुचयन्तरस्थं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि यद्भावभवितधियो मनुजास्तथैव सम्प्राप्य रूपमहिषास्मनायानभूषः सूक्तैरेव निगमाप्रतिस्तैस्तुवन्ति गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि आनन्दचिन्मयरसाप्रतिभाविताभिस्ताभिर्य एव निजरूपतया कलाभिः गोलोक एव निवसति अखिलात्मभूतो गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि प्रेमाञ्जनचुरितभक्तिविलोचनेन सन्ता सदैव हृदयेषु विलोकयन्ति यं श्यामसुन्दरमचिन्तगुणस्वरूपं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि रमादिमूर्तिषु कलानियमेन तिष्ठान्नानावतारमकरोद् भुवनेषु किन्तु कृष्णा स्वयं सम्भवत्परमः गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is a supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin and is the prime cause of all causes.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desires, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis.
I worship Govinda, the primeval lord who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids.
I worship Govinda, the primeval lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyamasundara is eternally manifest.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane.
I worship Govinda, the primeval lord who is inaccessible to the Vedas but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth.
I worship Govinda, the primeval lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years.
He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore.
I adore the same Govinda, the primeval lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments.
I worship Govinda, the primeval lord, residing in his own realm Goloka with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidant Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyamasundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love.
I worship Govinda, the primeval lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Narsimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. Rama Samhita ki jai.
Bhagavad Gita 7.1 Purport. शृण्वतां स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तनः हृदयन्ता हिस्तौ हि अभद्राणि विधिनोति सुहृत्सतं नष्टप्रयेष्व अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवतसेवया भागवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैस्तिकी तदा राजस्तमो भावा कामालोभदयाश्चये चेत एतैरनाविदं स्थितं सत्त्वे प्रसीदति एवं प्रसन्नमनसो भगवद्भक्तियोगतः भगवत्तत्त्वविज्ञानं मुक्तसङ्गस्य जायते विद्यते हृदयग्रन्थे सिद्ध्यन्ते सर्वसमस्याः क्षीयन्ते च यस्य कर्माणि दृष्टा एवात्मनीश्वरे. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity, and for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the signs of God perfectly.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of Asamsayam Samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the signs of Krishna. Bhagavad Gita 6.15. Yes. युञ्जन् एवं सदात्मानं योगी नियतमानसः शान्तिं निर्वाणपरमं न मत्समस्तं अधिगच्छति. Yunjan, practicing evam, as mentioned above, sada, constantly, atmanam, body, mind, and soul, yogi, the mystic transcendentalist, niyata manasaha, with regulated mind, santim, peace, nirvana paramam, cessation of material existence, mat samstam, the spiritual sky, the kingdom of God, adhigachati, does attain. Translation. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, and mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence. Purport. The ultimate goal in practicing yoga is now clearly explained. Yoga practice is not meant for attaining any kind of material facility. It is to enable the cessation of all material existence. One who seeks an improvement in health or aspires after material perfection is no yogi, according to Bhagavad Gita. Nor does cessation of material existence entail one's entering into the void, which is only a myth. There is no void anywhere within the creation of the Lord. Rather, the cessation of the material existence enables one to enter into the spiritual sky, the abode of the Lord. The abode of the Lord is clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita as that place where there is no need of sun, moon, or electricity. All the planets in the spiritual kingdom are self illuminated like the sun in the material sky. The kingdom of God is everywhere, but the spiritual sky and the planets thereof are called Param Dhama or superior abodes. A consummate yogi who is perfect in understanding Lord Krishna, as is clearly stated herein by the Lord Himself, Mat Chitta, Mat Para, Mat Sthanam, can attain real peace and can ultimately reach his supreme abode. Krishna Loka, known as Goloka Vrindavana. In the Brahma Samhita 5.37, it is clearly stated, Goloka eva nivasati akilatma bhuta. The Lord, although residing always in his abode called Goloka, is the all-pervading Brahman and the localized Paramatma as well by dint of his superior spiritual energies. No one can reach the spiritual sky, Vaikuntha, or enter into the Lord's eternal abode, Goloka Vrindavana, without the proper understanding of Krishna and his plenary expansion of Vishnu. Therefore, a person working Krishna consciousness is a perfect yogi because his mind is always absorbed in Krishna activities. Savai mana Krishna padara vindoyo. In the Vedas also, Svetashvatara Upanishad 3.8, we learn tam eva viditvati mrityam eti. One can overcome the path of birth and death only by understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, perfection of the yoga system is the attainment of freedom from material existence and not some magical jugglery or gymnastic feats to befool innocent people.
नात्यसनास्तास्तु योगिस्ति न चैकान्तम् अनस्नतः न चैति स्वप्नशीलस्य जाग्रतो नैव चार्जुन. Na, never, ati, too much, asnataha, of one who eats, too, but yogaha, linking with the Supreme, asti, there is, na, nor, cha, also, ekantam, overly, anasnataha, abstaining from the eating, na, nor, cha, also, ati, too much, swapnasilasya, of one who sleeps, jagrataha, or one who keeps night watch too much, na, not, eva, ever, cha, and Arjuna, O Arjuna. There is no possibility of one becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. Regulation of diet and sleep is recommended herein for the yogis. Too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. There is no need for men to eat animals, because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple foodstuff is considered to be in the mode of goodness, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking, smoking, and eating food which is not first offered to Krishna will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. Bhunjate te agam papa e pachanti atmakaranat. Anyone who eats for sense gratification pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering his food to Krishna, eats only sin. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuff offered to Krishna. A person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice, nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. The Krishna conscious person observes fasting as it is recommended in the scriptures. He does not fast or eat any more than is required, and he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga.
Text 6.17 Yuktahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. Yukta regulated, ahara eating, viharasya recreation, yukta regulated, cheshtasya of one who works for maintenance, karmasu is in discharging duties, yukta regulated, swapna avabodhasya sleep and wakefulness, yogaha practice of yoga, bhavati becomes, dukkha diminishing pains. Translation: he who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. As far as eating is concerned, it can be regulated only when one is practiced to take and accept prasadam, sanctified food. Lord Krishna is offered according to the Bhagavad Gita 9.26. Vegetables, flowers, fruits, grains, milk, etc. In this way, a person in Krishna consciousness becomes automatically trained not to accept food not meant for human consumption or nor in the category of goodness. As far as sleeping is concerned, a Krishna conscious person is always alert in the discharge of his duties in Krishna consciousness, and therefore any unnecessary time spent sleeping is considered a great loss. Avyartha kalatvam. A Krishna conscious person cannot bear to pass a minute of his life without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore, his sleeping is kept to a minimum. His ideal in this respect is Srila Rupa Goswami, who was always engaged in the service of Krishna and who could not sleep more than 2 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. Thakur Haridasa would not even accept prasadam nor even sleep for a moment without finishing his daily routine of chanting with his beads 300,000 names. As far as work is concerned, a Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not connected with Krishna's interest, and thus his work is always regulated and is untainted by sense gratification. Since there is no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness, And because he is regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all other bodily activities, there is no material misery for him.
Bhagavad Gita 6.18 Yada viniyatam chittam atmani eva vatistate nispra sarva kamebhyo yukta iti uchyate tada. Yada, when, viniyatam, particularly disciplined, chittam, the mind and its activities, atmani, in the transcendence, eva, certainly, avasthitate, become situated, nispraha, devoid of desire, sarva, for all kinds of, kamebhya, material sense gratification, yukta, well situated in yoga, iti, thus, uchyate, is said to be, tada, at that time. Translation: when the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. Purport: the activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 9.4.18 to 20. Sa vai mana Krishna padara vindayor vachamsi vaikunta guna nuvarnane karau kharer mandira marjanau dishu shrutim chakara yuchuta satkatodaye mukundalingalaya darshane darshau tadbritya gatra sparse ngasangamam grihanam cha tatpada pada saroja saurabhe srimatulasya rasanam tad arpite padau hare kshetra padanu sarpane siro hrishikesha padabhivandane कामांच दास्येन तु कामा काम्याय यतो तामा श्लोका janasraya rati. King Ambarisha first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then one after another he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, his hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of the lotus flowers offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above description of the engagements of the Maharaj Ambarisha. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is a perfect process for transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad Gita.
यथा दीपो निवतस्तो नेङ्गते सोपमा स्मृता योगिनो यत चित्तस्य युञ्जतो योगमात्मनः यथा as deepah, a lamp, nivatastah, in a place without wind, na, does not, ingate, waver, sa, this, upama, comparison, smrita, is considered, yoginah, of the yogi, yata chittasya, whose mind is controlled, yunjataha, constantly engaged, yogam, in meditation, atmanaha, on transcendence. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist, whose mind is controlled, remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendental self. A truly Krishna conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipful Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place.
text 6.20 to 23. Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra chaivat manatmanam pashyanam atmani tushyati sukham atyantikam yattad buddhigraham atindriyam vettiyatra na chaivayam stitaschalati tattvataha yam labdhava chapramam labham manyate nadikam tata yasmin stito na dukkhena gurunnapi vichalyate tam vidyat dukkha samyoga viyogam yoga samnitam. Yatra, in that state of affairs where uparamate sees, because one feels transcendental happiness, chittam, mental activities, niruddham, being restrained from matter, yoga sevaya, by performance of yoga, yatra, in which, cha, also, eva, certainly, atmana, by the pure mind, atmanam, the self, Pashyan, realizing the position of Atmani in the self, Tushyati, one becomes satisfied, Sukham, happiness, Atyantikam, supreme, Yat, which, Tat, that, Buddhi, by intelligence, Grahyam, accessible, Atindriyam, transcendental, Vetti, one knows, Yatra, wherein, Na, never, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Ayam, he, Sthitah, situated, Chalati, moves, Tattvataha, from the truth, Yam, that which, Labdhva, by attainment, Cha, also, Aparam, any other, Labham, gain, Manyate, considers, Na, never, Adhikam, more, Tatah, then that, Yasmin, in which, Sthitah, being situated, Na, never, Dukkhena, by miseries, Guruna api, even though very difficult, vichalyate, becomes shaken, tam, that vidyat, you must know, dukkha samyoga, of the miseries of material contact, viyogam, extermination, yoga samnitam, called transcend yoga. Translation, in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristics of the yoga principle. And after that, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgiving of identifying the self with the super self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super soul, and the monists think this to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure. Out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness, The duality of knowledge, the knower is not accepted by the non dualist. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure, realized through transcendental senses, is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras 4.34, this book says 4. Purushartha Shunyam Gununam Pratiprashva Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishta Va Chiti Shaktir Iti. This Chiti Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Cheto Darpana Marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Swarupena Vyavasthiti. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation in this verse. After nirvana or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vyavasthiti. This is the real life of the living entity. Maya or illusion is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishta Va Chitti Shakti Iti. This Chitti Shakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12 as Anandamayo Abhyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In the yoga system as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called Samprajnata Samadhi and Asamprajnata Samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researchers, he is said to have achieved Samprajnata Samadhi. In the Asamprajnata Samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure. For one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even these yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, perfections, in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection as is stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastics feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, but there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of the most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Agama Payano Nityas Tamas Titikshava Bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice.
Bhagavad Gita 6.24 Sa nischayena yoktavyo yogo nirvinna chetasa sankalpa prabhavan kamams tva sarvan asetsataha manasayendriya graman vinimya asamantataha sa nat tat that nischayena with firm determination yoktavya must be practiced yoga system anirvinna chetasa without deviation sankalpa mental speculations prabhavan born of kaman material desires tyaktva giving up sarvan all aseshata completely manasa by the mind eva certainly indriya gramam the full set of senses viniyamya regulating samantata from all sides. Translation: one should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides of the mind by the mind. Purport: the yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. One should be sure of success at the end and pursue this course with great perseverance, not becoming discouraged. If there is any delay in the attainment of success, success is sure for the rigid practitioner. Regarding Bhakti Yoga, Rupa Goswami says, Utsahan Nischayat Dhairyat Tat Karma Pravartanat Sangatyagat Sato Vrithe Sabdhir Bhakti Prasidyati. One can execute the process of Bhakti Yoga successfully with full hearted enthusiasm, perseverance, and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. Upadeshamrita 3. As for determination, one should follow the example of sparrow who lost her eggs in the waves of the ocean. A sparrow laid her eggs on the shore of the ocean, but the big ocean carried away the eggs on its waves. The sparrow became very upset and asked the ocean to return her eggs. The ocean did not even consider her appeal, so the sparrow decided to dry up the ocean. She began to pick out the water in her small beak, and everyone laughed at her for her impossible determination. The news of her activity spread, and at last Garuda, the gigantic bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, heard it. He became compassionate toward his small sister bird, and so he came to see the sparrow. Garuda was very pleased by the determination of the small sparrow, and he promised to help. Thus Garuda at once asked the ocean to return her eggs, lest he himself take up the work of the sparrow. The ocean was frightened at this and returned the eggs. Thus the sparrow became happy by the grace of Garuda. Similarly, the practice of yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga in Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very difficult job, but if anyone follows the principles with great determination, the Lord will surely help, for God helps those who help themselves.
Text 6.25 Shainyas Shainyer Uparamed buddhaya dhriti grihitaya atma samstham mana kritva na kinchit api chintayet. Shanya, gradually, Shanya, step by step, Uparamit, one should hold back, Buddhaya, by intelligence, Dhriti Grihitaya, carried by conviction, Atma, Samstham, placed in transcendence, Manah, mind, Kritva, making, Na, not, Kinchit, anything else, Api, even, Chintayet, should think of. Translation. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Purport. By proper conviction and intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activities. This is called pratyahara. The mind being controlled by conviction, meditation, and cessation from the senses should be situated in trance or samadhi. At that time, there is no longer any danger of becoming engaged in the material conception of life. In other words, although one is involved with matter, as long as the material body exists, one should not think about sense gratification. One should think of no pleasure aside from the pleasure of the Supreme Self. This state is easily attained by directly practicing Krishna consciousness.
Bhagavad Gita 6.26 Yato yato nischalati manaschalam asritam astiram tatastato niyamatyaitat atmani eva vasam nayet. Yatha yatha, wherever, nischalati, becomes verily agitated, mana, the mind, chanchalam, flickering, astiram, unsteady, tatha tatha, from there, niyamya, regulating, yatha, this, atmani, in the self, eva, certainly, vasam, control, nayet, must bring under. Translation. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Purport. The nature of the mind is flickering and unsteady, but a self-realized yogi has to control the mind. The mind should not control him. One who controls the mind and therefore the senses as well is called Goswami or Swami, and one who is controlled by the mind is called Godasa or the servant of the senses. A Goswami knows the standard of sense happiness. In transcendental sense, happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesha or the supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. That is the way of bringing the senses under control. What is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice.
Text 6.27 Prashyanta manasam hi enam yoginam sukhamuttamam upaiti shanti rajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham. Prashanta, peaceful, fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. Manasam, whose mind, he, certainly, enam, this, yoginam, yogi, sukham, happiness, uttamam, the highest, upaiti, attains, shanta rajasam, his passion pacified, Brahma Bhutam, liberation by identification with the Absolute, Akalmasham, freed from all past sinful reactions. Translation. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions of past deeds. Purport. Brahma Bhuta is the state of being free from material contamination and situated in the transcendental service of the Lord. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. Bhagavad Gita 18.54. One cannot remain in the quality of Brahman, the Absolute, until one's mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padarva Vindayo. To be always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord or to remain in Krishna consciousness is to be factually liberated from the mode of passion and all material contamination.
Bhagavad Gita 6.28 Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalamasaha sukhena brahma samsaparasmam parasam atyantam sukham asnute yajnan. Engaging in yoga practice, evam, thus, sada, always, atmanam, the self, yogi, one who is in touch with the supreme self, vigata, freed from kalmasha, all material contamination, sukhena, in transcendental happiness, brahma samsparsham, being in constant touch with the supreme, atyantam, the highest sukham, happiness, astnute, attains. Thus, the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. Purport: self-realization means knowing one's constitutional position in relationship to the Supreme. The individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme, and his position is to render transcendental service to the Lord. This transcendental contact with the Supreme is called Brahma Samsparsha.
Text 6.29 Sarvabhutastam Atmanam Sarvabhutani Chatmani Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma Sarvatra Samadarshanaha. Sarvabhutastam, situated in all beings, Atmanam, the super soul, Sarva, all, Bhutani, entities, Cha, also, Atmani, in the self, Ikshate, does see, Yoga Yuktat Atma, one who is dovetailed in Krishna consciousness, Sarvatra, everywhere, Samadarshanaha, seeing equally. Translation: a true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same supreme soul, everywhere. Purport: a Krishna-conscious yogi is the perfect seer because he sees Krishna, the Supreme, situated in everyone's heart as Super Soul Paramatma. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrudeshe Arjuna Tishtati. The Lord in his Paramatma feature is situated within both the heart of the dog and that of the Brahmana. The perfect yogi knows that the Lord is eternally transcendental and is not materially affected by his presence in either a dog or a Brahmana. That is the supreme neutrality of the Lord. The individual soul is also situated in the individual heart, but he is not present in all hearts. That is the distinction between the individual soul and the super soul. One who is not factually in the practice of yoga cannot see so clearly. A Krishna conscious person can see Krishna in the heart of both the believer and the non-believer. In the Smriti, Satvata Tantra 3.49, this is confirmed as follows: Atatvak cha mritvad matrvad atmahi paramo hari. The Lord, being the source of all beings, is like the mother and the maintainer. As the mother is neutral to all different kinds of children, the Supreme Father or the mother is the Supreme Father or mother is also. Consequently, the super soul is always in every living being. Outwardly, also, every living being is situated in the energy of the Lord. As will be explained in the 7th chapter, the Lord has primarily two energies, the spiritual or superior and the material or inferior. The living entity, although part of the superior energy, is conditioned by the inferior energy. The living entity is always in the Lord's energy. Every living entity is situated in him in one way or another. The yogi sees equally because he sees that all living entities, although in different situations, according to the results of fruitive work, in all circumstances remain the servants of God. While in the material energy, the living entity serves the material senses. and while in the spiritual energy, he serves the Supreme Lord directly. In either case, the living entity is the servant of God. This vision of equality is perfect in a person in Krishna consciousness.
Bhagavad Gita 6.30 Ya mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mayi pashyati tasyaham na prasanyasmi prasanya pranasyami sacha me na pranasyati. Ya, whoever mam me pashyati sees sarvatra everywhere, sarvam everything, cha and mai in me, pashyati sees, tasya for him, aham I, na not, pranashyami almo I am lost, sa he, cha also me too, to me, na not, pranasyati is lost. Translation: For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Purport: A person in Krishna consciousness certainly sees Lord Krishna everywhere, and he sees everything in Krishna. Such a person may appear to see all separate manifestations of the material nature, but in each and every instance he is conscious of Krishna, knowing that everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy. Nothing can exist without Krishna, and Krishna is the Lord of everything. This is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the development of love of Krishna, a position of transcendental even to material liberation. At this stage of Krishna consciousness, beyond self-realization, the devotee becomes one with Krishna in the sense that Krishna becomes everything for the devotee, and the devotee becomes full in loving Krishna. An intimate relationship between the Lord and the devotee then exists. In that stage, the living entity can never be annihilated, nor is the personality of Godhead ever out of the sight of the devotee. To merge in Krishna is spiritual annihilation. A devotee takes no such risk. It is stated in the Brahma Samhita 5.38. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam chama sundaram achinta gunaswarupam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shamasundara, situated within the heart of the devotee. At this stage, Lord Krishna never disappears from the sight of the devotee, nor does the devotee ever lose sight of the Lord. In the case of a yogi who sees the Lord as Paramatma in the heart, the same applies. Such a yogi turns into a pure devotee and cannot bear to live for a moment without seeing the Lord within himself.
Text 6.31 Sarvabhutastitam yo mam bhajate ekatvam ashtita sarvata vartamanopi sa yogi mayi vartate. Sarva bhutastitam, situated in everyone's heart. Ya, he who, mam, me, bhajati, serves in devotional service. Ekatvam, in oneness. Astita, situated. Sarvata, in all respects. Vartamana, being situated. Api, in spite of. Sah, he, yogi, the transcendentalist. Mayi, in me, vartate, remains. Translation: Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the Super Soul, knowing that I and the Super Soul within all creatures are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. Purport: A yogi who is practicing meditation on the Super Soul sees within himself the plenary portion of Krishna as Vishnu, with 4 hands holding conch shell, wheel, club, and lotus flower. The yogi should know that Vishnu is not different from Krishna. Krishna, in this form of Super Soul, is situated in everyone's heart. Furthermore, there is no difference between the innumerable Super Souls present in the innumerable hearts of living entities. Nor is there a difference between a Krishna conscious person always engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna and a perfect yogi engaged in meditation on the super soul. The yogi in Krishna consciousness, even though he may be engaged in various activities while in material existence, remains always situated in Krishna. This is confirmed in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.187 of Srila Rupa Goswami. Nikilashva api avasthathau jivan mukta sa uchyate. A devotee of the Lord, always acting in Krishna consciousness, is automatically liberated. In the Narada Pancharatra, this is confirmed in this way. Dikkalayadi anavachinne Krishne cheto vidhayacha tanmayo bhavati kshipram jivo brahmani yogyayet. By concentrating one's attention on the transcendental form of Krishna, who is all pervading and beyond time and space, one becomes absorbed in thinking of Krishna and then attains the happy state of transcendental association with him. Krishna consciousness is the highest stage of trance in yoga practice. This very understanding that Krishna is present as Paramatma in everyone's heart makes the yogi faultless. The Vedas, Gopala Tapani Upanishad 1.21, confirm this inconceivable potency of the Lord as follows. Ekopi san bahudha yo vabhati. Although the Lord is one, he is present in innumerable hearts as many. Similarly, in the Smriti Shastra, Matsya Purana, it is said, Eka evo paro Vishnu sarva vyapi na samshaya aishwaryat rupam ekam cha suryavat bahuderyate. Vishnu is one and yet he is certainly all pervading. By his inconceivable potency, in spite of his one form, he is present everywhere at the sun as the sun appears in many places at once.
Bhagavad Gita 6.32 Atmaupamena sarvatra samam pasyati yorjuna sukham va vyadi va dukkham sa yogi paramo mata. Atma with his self, Aupamyena by comparison, Sarvatra everywhere, Samam equally, Pasyati sees, Ya he who, Arjuna O Arjuna, Sukham happiness, Va or Yadi if, Va or Dukham distress, Sa such, Yogi a transcendentalist, Paramaha perfect, Mata is considered. Translation. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison on his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. Purport. One who is Krishna conscious is a perfect yogi. He is aware of everyone's happiness and distress by dint of his own personal experience. The cause of the distress of a living entity is forgetfulness of his relationship with the God. And the cause of happiness is knowing Krishna to be the supreme enjoyer of all the activities of the human being, the proprietor of all lands and planets, and the sincerest friend of all living entities. The perfect yogi knows that the living being who is conditioned by the modes of material nature is subjected to the threefold material miseries due to forgetfulness of his relationship with Krishna, and because one in Krishna consciousness is happy, he tries to distribute the knowledge of Krishna everywhere. Since the perfect yogi tries to broadcast the importance of becoming Krishna conscious, he is the best philanthropist in the world, and he is the dearest servitor of the Lord. Nacha tasman manushyesu kaschin me priya krittama. Bhagavad Gita 18.69. In other words, the devotee of the Lord always looks to the welfare of all living entities. And in this way, he is factually the friend of everyone. He is the best yogi because he does not desire perfection in yoga for his certain personal benefit, but tries for others also. He does not envy his fellow living entities. He is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested only in his personal elevation. The yogi who has withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate properly may not be as perfect as the devotee who is trying to be his best to to best to turn every man toward Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Shri Guru Bandho Mohi Savadana Mate Bandho Mohi Savadana Mate Jahara Prasade Bhai Ye Bhava Toriya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te कृष्ण प्राप्ति होय जहाँ होय ते गुरुमुख पद्मा वाक्या चितते कोरिया क्या आरना कोरी हो माने आशा आरना कोरी हो माने आशा श्री गुरु चराने रति ऐसे उत्तम गति ऐसे उत्तम गति ये प्रसाद पूरे सर्व आशा ये प्रसाद पूरे सर्व आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु शेष चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु शेष दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेदे गाय जहर चरितो वेदे गाय जहर चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पादचाया आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पादचाया आहा प्रभु कोरो दया देहो मोरे पादचाया देहो मोरे पादचाया एबेजाज गुशुक त्रिभुवाना एबेजाज गुशुक त्रिभुवाना प्रभुपाद पतित पवाना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले इति नामिने